There cannot be development without peace and security, and there cannot be sustainable peace and security without development. It is in this context that a number of programs have been put in place to form the framework within which the nexus of peace, security and development is to be pursued by various stakeholders within the African Union, within the regional economic communities, within the national spaces. When you take the African peace and security architecture, it covers a whole range of issues from prevention of conflict to management and resolution of conflicts, and finally the stage of post-conflict reconstruction and development, which takes into account the fact that when a country goes through conflict, its entire fabric would have been disrupted, and therefore you must help that country and this society to come back to vitality in all aspects.
We are really at a crossroad in operationalizing our ABSA, and definitely peace support operations are key in terms of contributing to prevention, stabilization, but also promoting post-conflict reconstruction and development. And here, I think there is really a big effort that is done in terms of investing not only in the early warning, but really preparing also the early action, which is critical in our days. The second is indeed the issue of capacity building. And all what you realize in these two steps, important steps, will certainly enable our peace support operation to be done in the best way.
The African Union Commission's Peace Support Operations Division, PSOD, alternatively referred to as the African Standby Force Continental Planning Element, was set up pursuant to the provisions of Article 13 of the Protocol relating to the establishment of the Peace and Security Council, 2002, and Article 18 of the Policy Framework on the Establishment of the African Standby Force and Military Staff Committee, 2004. It is the PSOD that responds to peace support operations (PSOs) matters within the Peace and Security Department. The PSOD puts together policies, guidelines, agreements, frameworks, and mechanisms to help bring together regional peace and security mechanisms to respond to peace support operations and security challenges. In order to enable the Peace and Security Council to perform its responsibilities with respect to the deployment of peace support operations (PSOs) and interventions pursuant to Article 4H and J of the Constitutive Act and African Standby Force (ASF) was established. This force is composed of standby multidisciplinary contingents with civilian, police, and military components in their countries of origin and ready for rapid deployment at appropriate notice. The strength and types of these components, their degree of readiness, and general location shall be determined in accordance with established AU-PSO SOPs shall be subject to reviews depending on prevailing crisis and conflict situations.
The PSOD, as it is called, was established pursuant to a decision member states took way back in 2003. The PSC protocol, which was approved even earlier in 2002, provides that there shall be an African Standby Force that shall be established with contingents that are retained in their countries of origin to enable the Peace and Security Council to be able to intervene in cases of crisis, to launch operations in that regard. Now, subsequent to that, to the protocol, the member states then directed that there should be an elaboration of how this Africa Standby Force is going to look like. And in this regard, a document called the Policy Framework on the Establishment of the African Standby Force and the Military Staff Committee was developed and approved by the member states.
PSOD, as it is commonly known, is responsible for planning, launching, sustaining, monitoring or managing, and liquidating peace support operations. Within that context, Plans and Operations Unit responsibility is to plan and manage African Union mandated peace support operations.
For us, it's mostly planning operations, directing those operations, managing them, launching them, sustaining them, and ensuring that through management and directing, which is done mostly by the policy organs and the appropriate authorities, we provide the support that is required. So in a nutshell, we are planners. That's what you could say. That's why we're called planning elements. Now, in Addis Ababa, the AU took a decision then to call the one that is based in Addis the Peace Support Operations Division. So we are that division.
Our mandate is really to provide logistics and general service support to AU peace support operations. The mandate has two aspects. The first aspect is to contribute to the enhancement of the African Standby Force by developing logistics policies, but also making sure that we develop the capacities and capabilities of the African Standby Force. The second aspect is the support to be provided to AU current peace support operations, like what we are doing actually to provide logistical support to the African Union mission in Somalia, which is an AU mandated mission, but also to provide additional support to AU authorized missions, such as, for example, the multinational Joint Task Force against Boko Haram, which is operating in the Lake Chad Basin Commission area, but also the AU initiative against the Lord Resistance Army, but also the AU observer mission in Burundi. So we are providing the logistical support, and we do it, of course, in coordination with other departments within the commission, such as the administration and human resources, but also with the Department of Finance and the Department of Legal Affairs.
The overall function of the Policy Development Unit is to develop strategic level policies for peace support operations. And it has two cells: Policy Development Cell, Policy Research, Lessons Learned, and Best Practices Cell. The overall function of the Capability Development Unit is to provide standby forces for peace support operations. And it has three cells: Training and Development Cell, Monitoring and Evaluation Cell, Capability Generation Cell.
My unit currently has 11 staff officers, and these staff officers are deployed under the three cells, which is under Plans and Operation Unit. And the main cell is the planning cell. And then the second cell, of course, is the operation cell. And then the third cell is information analysis, which is similar to intelligence. The planning unit, which, as I said, carries the bulk of the activities within plans and operations, potential crisis areas within Africa. But to do that, the cell works closely with the conflict and early warning division. And it advises, once it's detected, it advises the AU leadership of such areas. The second task of that cell is to undertake contingency planning. Contingency planning for possible involvement of AU peace support operations. The third critical task which that cell does is to act as a nodal point that we work very closely with our regional economic communities or regional mechanisms in terms of peace support operations. So this cell is a nodal point with the RECs and REMs in terms of peace support operations. The cell also leads in technical assessment missions, because before the AU deploys to a mission, there are some processes which we go through. And one of those processes is to undertake a technical assessment mission. The next critical task which that cell does is the development of a concept of operations. And this is a guiding document for us when we undertake, or when a mission is undertaken. It is known as the concept of operations, and that cell undertakes that.
When we moved from the Organization of African Unity to African Union in 2002, we then were immediately confronted with the challenges in Burundi. And then we had to get mediation efforts undergoing there, and then have a mission to accompany that and ensure the successes that we envisioned. Now, since that time to now, we have had about 14 peace operations categorized into mandated operations, so AU mandated operations, which are ones that the Peace and Security Council gives the authority to deploy. We have authorized missions, which are ones that other entities other than the AU mandates, but then still comes to the Peace and Security Council to request authority. And then we have categorized another, which we refer to as endorsed missions, wherein, unlike authorized missions wherein we have an institutional framework with the entity, these ones, we don't have a formal institutional framework, but they still brief the Peace and Security Council about the operations and what they are doing and successes. Then there is the hybrid operation that we've had also with the UN, which is the African Union, United Nations hybrid mission in Darfur, wherein we work jointly together to ensure that we put together our efforts in a comparative manner and to ensure complementarity. So that's one key success for us. And we have also been able to enhance our framework to ensure compliance and accountability to international humanitarian law, international human rights law, and conduct and discipline, which are international principles that, as member states and as the African Union, we sign up to as international norms and standards.
The important element is that while preparing and operationalizing the ABSA, we are also putting a focus on having more women included in our deployments, and also having the highest standards in terms of compliance and prevention of any sexual-related violence. So these are very important elements that we are working on, and I think we are really proud of what we have realized until now. So as we speak, I think we can only recall all the contributions that we made to Mali, to Central African Republic. Somalia, indeed, this is our biggest contribution. And also the fact that we have a joint force with the UN now in UNAMID in Darfur. I think that the way we are going to shape and prepare our interventions will be based on lessons learned from all this past deployment. Africa Union can deploy or can generate a force within remarkable short term. I think AMISOM, with the very high level of sacrifices done by our women and men on the ground, will remain as a bold contribution to stabilization and securitization of our member states. And I can only here pay tribute to our TTCs. And indeed, I think that's why I think during the last commemoration of the Africa Day, we inaugurated here in this very peace building a memorial wall on our fallen heroes for all those missions that we have started since 2000. So I think this is really another significant signal of the determination of Africa to bring African solutions to African problems.
Countries contributing troops to the African Union mission in Somalia have called for a joint exit strategy for the withdrawal of their peacekeepers. Government officials from Burundi, Kenya, Ethiopia, Djibouti and Uganda have met in Addis Ababa to discuss the matter. Sujatian's Gurumchala has more.
Since it started operations in Somalia, AMISOM was time and again praised for its significant contributions in pacifying Somalia and halting the advancement of Al-Shabaab in the Eastern African states.
I believe that we are on the right path, and I want to thank the troop and police contributing countries. I want to thank our leadership in the AU Commission, the chairman of the African Union, for all the efforts and clear vision of where we have to go, where we're going. We in the field, we are implementing and we'll try as much as we can to implement faithfully their decisions. We've just come from the Peace and Security Council meeting. We've been discussing the need for renewal of AMISOM mandate for another year. We had very frank and solid discussions there, and I want to thank the fact that our Peace and Security Department, through PSOD and through the Commissioner, Sherge, has presented to the decision makers all the elements they needed to take correct decisions.
What we have noted about the AU is that the types of conflicts that we are confronted with are actually evolving. Over time, they are not the same as they were 30 years ago, 20 years ago. The types of people who are involved in these operations and the organizations that are involved are different. We just had a meeting with the Peace and Security Council where we were indicating what those challenges were. And some of them were that the participants in the conflicts do not have clear political agendas. They are not amenable to a peaceful settlement. They use violence indiscriminately, even targeting people who are not part of the problem, women, children, the elderly. In this regard, then, we are then deploying our capabilities, our forces, into an area where, for lack of a better word, one would say there is no peace to be kept, or the peace is extremely fragile, and force of arms has to be used to enforce peace, because there are those who seek peace, who are seeking a peaceful resolution to the conflict. That then on its own puts a lot of challenges on us in terms of how those forces are prepared, how we deploy them, how they are managed, and the outcomes of the process. And funding, because for lack of a better, as we say, we're conducting wartime operations, are extremely expensive. It then puts a lot of demand on resources that our organization and our entity can provide. And those resources are not only in terms of money, but also in terms of personnel. We're running some of the bloodiest missions in the history of peacekeeping operations and peace support operations. The rate of deaths are quite high because we're practically fighting a war. This does put challenges then in that regard to say whether peace support operations would be the only tool to be used in such instances. And of course the answer is no. Peace support operations are but one of the many tools that the African Union must be using in order to try and resolve conflicts. Again, it goes back to coordination. Do we have mediators? Do we have a clear political agenda? Do we know who the interlocutors are in the mission area? Are they amenable to the issues that are being discussed? And most important, of course, are the actors themselves keen to have a peaceful settlement? So those are always the constant issues that remain as challenge. The political settlement and the preparedness of the participants in the conflict to find a resolution. Because if they themselves are not amenable to consensus, it is extremely difficult for us as an international organization to impose our will on because at the end of the day, it's their issue that they must be able to deal with.
We've got 3 layers of responsibility. One layer is the member states. Then the other layer is the regions. You know, we've got 5 security regions. The REX and the RMs, as we call them. They give a certain level of training. Then the AU is responsible for developing the strategic guiding documents on training. And in that, of course, we are supported by a number of partners that help us with the aspects of training. The one main one is the African Association of Peace Support Training. We go to that institution, which then liaises with its members to find the ones that have got the relevant expertise in accordance with what we want to develop. And then in that we provide some level of financial support to ABSA, which comes from quite a number of partners. Some of it is from the AU member states, but at most we've been supported by the European Union. We've also been supported by GIZ. We've been supported by the Training for Peace program, which is a Norwegian-funded sort of training program. I mean, I'm just naming the few that are the big ones that we've dealt with. And then the regions also, because they implement what we develop here as the guiding documents, they then have their own partners, donor partners that are supporting them. So we do benefit a lot from partners like NATO. In the past few years, the biggest one was the European Union support to the regions, like the Turkish government, like the United States government, who offer training to personnel of PSOD, Peace Support Operations.
It's time more than ever to unite and to work for the great dreams of our founding fathers to have a peaceful, developed Africa.